The latest in our coffee morning session. So we are delighted today to have a really interesting topic, and that is about our social enterprise gold mark, and it's how organisations can uplift from their social enterprise mark accreditation to that gold standard. So we are absolutely delighted to have a couple of speakers with us today. And I'm also going to introduce the team to you, first of all, from Social Enterprise Mark. We are recording this session and it will be available on our YouTube channel, so please do feel free to also catch up with that later on if you wish to, or share it with colleagues that you think may be of interest. And we've got a chat function, so we will be doing a Q&A towards the end of this session. So first of all, the Social Enterprise Mark team, we're very lucky. We've got 4 of us today. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Lucy, who's our Managing Director. So hello to Lucy.
Hi, everybody. Really pleased to see so many people and lots of familiar faces.
Thanks, Lucy. So Lucy obviously has been Managing Director of Social Enterprise Mark since its foundation 11 years ago now. So very knowledgeable about everything that we do, about the state of social enterprise as a sector across the UK. And also we have presence in 7 countries. So that sort of global traction is very much growing, as well as particular traction in particular sectors, for example, health and universities, which we'll come on to in just a moment. We also have Sophie with us, and Sophie is our marketing manager. So those of you who are mark holders, you will have had lots of communication, I'm sure, with Sophie. Super helpful on making sure that you get your social enterprise mark holder profiles up on our directory and supporting all of that sort of marketing communication message to lever your accreditation. So Sophie, do you want to say a hello and a few words?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Good to see so many people here. It's especially really nice to see a lot of our current social enterprise mark holders here that maybe want to find out more about the progression to the gold mark. I'm really looking forward to hearing from Andy and Richard.
Yeah. And then over on this side of my screen, I've got Richard Cobbett, but we are going to refer to Richard as Rick today, if I can remember that one. So Rick leads our assessment and quality standards. So really, really good, I think, for those people who have booked onto this session to see sort of both sides of the fence, if you like, around the accreditation standards, the framework, the criteria, eligibility, and how we go through that independent, robust methodology of assessment. So Richard is your go-to person for any of those questions today. So hi, Rick.
Hello.
So just to introduce our 2 speakers, absolutely delighted, especially Richard was speaking today. Then we had a little bit of a might not be available, and we are very grateful, Richard, that you are with us today. So Richard is the communications lead at Integrated Care 24. So I know a little bit in terms of integrated care, or IC24. You started mid-90s as a small group of GPs that sort of set up to provide that urgent emergency care within your locality, Southeast. And you now service something incredible, like 6 million patients, customers, don't you, I think?
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see you. Yeah, so IC24 really has kind of grown from a small group of GP cooperatives who provided the out of hours service to when GPs were were closed of an evening and the weekend, and we're just grown into a much bigger organisation. One of the probably best known services we provide is the NHS 111 service, of which we are it's a contracted service. So we're one of a number of providers of that service. That's our best known service, but broadly speaking, our urgent healthcare services that reduce the pressure on other services such as the ambulance service and A&E, and kind of preventing people from defaulting to using those services and trying to get them help earlier in the kind of pathway to prevent them just pitching up at A&E or calling 999.
And I also know, having had a little sneak around your amazing website, so one, I loved your website because you put social enterprise and your accreditation standard absolutely front and centre of your website. So a really good example of when we go for accreditations, that we use them well, so that they're not the sort of the tokenism of a gym membership that we all think, oh, I must join the gym, and then we realise that we haven't been for 4 months. You absolutely really have that embedded from first sight on your website. And you've also been shortlisted for the SE UK Social Enterprise Awards this year as well, haven't you, I think?
Yeah, we're finalists in the health and social care category. So we've been finalists in other categories for the past couple of years, and yeah, not one. So hopefully this year is the third time lucky.
Fabulous. Well, we wish you luck with that, and also 100 top 100 best companies to work for as well. So obviously, recognising that awards and accolades are really important in terms of building credibility for IC24, and that really strongly links with some of the work that we're going to talk about today around that sort of assessment and how social enterprises really embed that sort of social value and that delivery across their organisations, particularly when they're looking to uplift to gold mark standards. So thank you for that. Really appreciate that, Richard. And Andy, so I'd like to introduce Andy Norris. So I'm going to read your title because it's you must have quite a long business card, Andy. You're Head of Culture and Inclusion Director, Head of Culture and Inclusion and Director of the Social Enterprise Hub over at the University of Westminster, aren't you? So say hello and tell us a little bit of background about the university.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Good to be here. Yeah, so I have my substantive role is Head of Culture and Inclusion, and I'm based in our Human Resources Department. And I support right across the university, working around our people strategy, which is called Being Me, Being Westminster. So that's looking at how we recruit and develop and support all of our colleagues as they go through the university. You know, linking into things like well-being and equality, diversity and inclusion. But I also have a day a week where I am director of our Social Enterprise Hub, which is a new project, and the hub doesn't physically exist. So we're just at the very start of that journey, but it will do in 2023. But in the meantime, we're starting to just work across the university, put a project group together, start to engage with academic colleagues and professional colleagues and with our students, of course. And the start of that journey was probably about 2 years ago, and the work that we did to gain the accreditation, the gold mark, Social Enterprise Gold Mark. So, I mean, obviously the experience of going through all of that work, I'll be able to share today. So yeah, in terms of my role at the university, I've also previous roles. I've worked in corporate social responsibility, environmental sustainability, organizational development. So I've had quite a kind of weaving career path, I suppose. But all of that experience has come together in my current role. Both are working with culture change, but also social enterprise as well. So it's given me the experience. I've always worked with quite a broad range of colleagues and students, so I have quite a good network across the university, and that is I guess we'll come on to maybe touch upon that. One of the key things about the assessment and applying for the Social Enterprise Gold Mark is knowing the people to talk to in your organization, knowing where the work is going on and how to evidence that. So that previous experience, particularly working around corporate social responsibility and sustainability, put me in good stead for that. So that's just a little bit about my role at the university, but good to see everyone.
And it's really interesting because Westminster also has an MSc, doesn't it, around social enterprise. So again, it's you're delivering the courses, you're inspiring that next generation of social entrepreneurs, you're embedding social enterprise throughout the university as an HEI, which is a really important sector for social enterprise adoption. But your role particularly is about organisational. So it's not specifically from an educational academic perspective that you're here today. It's about how we can kind of embed social enterprise and that importance of accreditation through the whole organisation.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I work primarily on the professional side, although obviously very closely with academics and students. But in terms of the assessment, yeah, it will be talking about the organisational side of things.
Lovely, thank you very much. So I think really great background from two of our existing gold mark holders. So we appreciate your time today. But to bring Rick into this part of the conversation, Rick, would you perhaps be able to just give us sort of a couple of bullet points about the different things that we look at as a gold mark holder over and above those that have come from the social enterprise mark and are looking to do that sort of uplift?
Yeah, I mean, the gold mark criteria, there are 5 of them, essentially encapsulate what's already in the social enterprise mark, but take it on to a whole new level of practice, really. And I think that's the main difference with the social enterprise mark. I mean, we're principally looking to see that people have established themselves in a way which shows their commitment to key socialised enterprise principles such as profit distribution, which I think is possibly the key one. But when it comes to the gold mark, we're actually beginning to sort of set a much higher bar, which people need to sort of demonstrate they're actually practicing what they preach in a lot more detail, relevant to the 5 criteria of governance, stakeholder engagement, business ethics and operational practices, financial transparency and social impact. And I think it's possibly the final 2 that are the ones that stretch people the most, because it does demand that you are thinking about what you do more carefully, not just in how you report it, but how you plan it in the first place. How do you set your stall out, communicate it to people, involve stakeholders in developing your agenda and your different plans and objectives, and then how do you go about sort of measuring and quantifying what you're doing against that original plan to show that you're doing what you say you're doing, basically. So at the social enterprise mark level, we're just looking mainly for that spirit of purpose. And yes, we are asking people to tell us what they do to fulfill that purpose, but the demands are much lower at that level. So I think that puts it in a nutshell, I think.
No, that's absolutely great. And I think really important, because I know, for example, we've got Matt here from the Growth Company. So hi, Matt. The Growth Company are a fairly recent social enterprise mark holder, and I think that maybe the reason that Matt is also booked onto this session is you're just starting that process of going through the gold uplift. So being able to hear from different organisations that have gone through that maybe a couple of years just ahead of you. But we had a really invigorating conversation with Matt yesterday, and I think that again is one of those things that I find whenever I talk to our gold mark holders, is that elevation of passion and commitment, and how social enterprise and therefore social value is really embedded and cascaded throughout organisations. And that doesn't matter whether it's kind of, approaching a closed campus and almost, security guards sort of, on car parks, through to reception, right the way up through to, chancellors, managing directors, CEOs, etc. And that's a really important part of the gold assessment in terms of sort of stakeholder engagement. So putting it on a sort of like a strategic business plan and saying, we're a social enterprise and we do good things for good people, and we're nice people ourselves, is not going to cut it. So one of the things that is really important is the robust methodology that we use against transparent set criteria for the different levels of our accreditation. So it's not a case of we apply and there will be an automatic gain of that accreditation. It's something that we work very closely with our mark holder organisations to help them through that process, help them understand where that social value is within their organisation, how it's evidenced, and also areas of improvement. So I think the outflow from an accreditation standard, particularly with the detail that Rick's explained for the gold mark, is really important. It's a working with to help that continuous improvement around standards. I think that's sort of the tailored plan and the information that it gives to organisations to inform business decision, to inform strategic plan is a really key element. So I guess if I can kind of head to you, Andy, why was it important to the University of Westminster to consider applying for the gold mark? First of all, does it help inform strategic plans for the university, or was it that the strategic plan was kind of there and now you're sort of looking at the accreditation for gold mark as a way of enabling that?
It kind of came together at the same time, really. So we were starting to look at needing to audit what we were doing around social enterprise, which is always a challenge for any big business or organization, because there's so much going on across, in this case, a university, in terms of what we're teaching, researching. Our business operations are huge in terms of our estate. And so we were starting to form, as I mentioned earlier, the social enterprise hub and the business plan behind developing that. And as you mentioned as well, Sally, the MSc, social enterprise, was also starting to be developed. We had pockets of work going on for social enterprise. We had a creative enterprise centre, which supported our students to develop their own social enterprise ideas or projects or small businesses, or link into social enterprises to gain experience around employability. And so what we tend to do, when this work is happening, whatever the project might be, is you need to kind of set a benchmark or audit really what is happening at the universities. So where are we? How can we kind of measure, the level that we're at? And so a social enterprise project board had been set up. But as also can happen in big organizations, in terms of the gold mark itself, or social enterprise mark and then gold mark, that was initiated through our business school, Westminster Business School, who hadn't necessarily, and then at the same time, this project board was being developed in a kind of senior level of the university. So it was only when the two kind of came together that, in terms of doing an audit, that the idea that actually we've already started to look at the social enterprise mark and gold mark, and that would be a really incredibly effective way of auditing what we're doing. In terms of the standard itself, I think, anything, obviously you need to be successful, but once you are, that helps build engagement further. So, I think it gives you something you can promote, and both internally to get people more involved and to bring people along in the journey and understand, kind of what the aims are around social enterprise, but also externally as well, in terms of, when we recruit staff, but primarily students. Students now are looking at universities, colleges, further education, and what kind of organization are you, what are your values, what do you stand for, what have you achieved, and the competition is great. So I think it helps us to define what kind of organization we are as well, externally, and that helps with other stakeholders, but in our case primarily when we're recruiting or getting students to join our university.
And also staff recruitment being that employer of choice, because it's that transparency about living out those values, isn't it, I guess? And Richard, you obviously work in a highly competitive sector, but as a sort of NHS spin out, in terms of the services that we anticipate will be provided through our local hospitals. But you're sort of working, as I say, against quite a complex backdrop, aren't you? And do you find that sort of applying for the gold mark, was that part of not only your foundation as a social enterprise, but is it also part of telling your story from a sort of a marketing and a goodwill perspective? Or do you use that sort of, find people are using that within your employment and that sort of induction process for new staff, etc.?
Yeah, I think certainly, yeah, even from the day that I came for my interview, the first thing that was on the revolving door, right at kind of face level, was the gold mark logo, and then I got to the receptionist, and it was behind her with the plaque. So I think applying for it, being successful with it predates my time. So it was when I joined, we'd already been a gold mark holder for a couple of years, and now I've had it up for about 7 years. Yeah. But certainly, I think from a healthcare perspective, I suppose a contracting of tendering for services, social impact was something that, and social value was something that stood us apart from competitors. Whereas now, as the NHS procurement changes, there'll be a weighting within tenders on social value. So I think other organisations, trusts, ambulance services, they're probably kind of catching up everywhere and kind of recognising their social impact more. So for us, it was about still needing something to stand out from the crowd. We stood out with that, and then when the others catch you up, I think it's really important to say, well, we still we have that, and it's independently ratified and accredited by an external agency. And it goes back to a point that was mentioned earlier about kind of not just being a good social enterprise, or not just believing that you're one, but being able to actually prove it as well, from an independent point of view.
Thank you. So a question to both Richard and Andy. Are there sort of any particular challenges that you came across as you were sort of like, our RIC kind of went, right, we need to gather this information, we need, more detail on governance, more detail on stakeholder engagement, more detail on your social impact reinvestment to social or environmental objects. Were there any challenges in terms of the information that we were asking for, or how you gathered that information across your businesses?
Yeah,
I don't mind who goes first.
I'll fight it out. I'll go first. Yeah, I mean, I think also from a naming point of view, it makes it slightly easier for us, as Nikki did our accreditation this time, so we don't have to get confused about which Richard we're talking about. But yeah, certainly, I think, I mean, from a really practical point of view, I had in the old days when we sat at the desks and had drawers next to them, I had a printed out copy of the assessment paper, and I tried to, through the years, just kind of write things down there, because 3 years is quite a long time and you forget good things. So I kind of, just from a memory point of view, I'd write things down to try and remember them. I think Nikki would probably back up in that. I think certainly some of our, I guess, kind of quantifying what we did in terms of data was an area that Nikki recognised that we needed to work on. I think we recognised it ourselves internally, and then in some ways it's nice to have that reassurance from another body that you're thinking in the right direction, because it wasn't embedded in our day-to-day reporting like we did report on the performance in our contact centres, or the various compliance issues, but we didn't have day-to-day reporting. That's something we're now working with the University of Northampton on a social return on investment matrix. That piece of works, it's kind of been touted, and this has been the driver for kind of actually getting it underway, and we're underway with that now. So I think Nikki potentially, I think she kind of pushed us in a different way as well. So it's because Rick understood, knew a bit more about IC24 because he'd worked with us for many years. So in many ways, it was good for us to have a different perspective on it from someone who knew less about the organisation, because you'd be asked a different type of question, and it kind of forces you in a way to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what is business as usual, what is real social value, and getting some kind of good probing questions, and it's challenging, and you're quite right too.
Brilliant, thank you. Andy, anything that you'd like to add from the university's perspective?
Just to skip back to the previous question, I think Richard touched on it really well. I think in terms of distinctiveness for the university, we were the first London university to get the gold mark, so that gives us that kind of competitive edge again. And I think and also the external accreditation, it's an external body that are giving you that accreditation. I think they're two key things that Richard mentioned. In terms of challenges, I guess similar, the challenge is obviously you've got an awful lot of evidence and data that you need to collect. So you have to involve, you know, a large number of people across the organization. So you have to be very clear about why you're doing it and why you're asking them for this information, and then collating it all. But yeah, it wasn't really so much a challenge because, you know, we gather data and evidence for other submissions. So I think that's one of the things to do, is if you are doing that with other, you know, for other accreditations or just work generally, it's to not try and duplicate, you know, link into what you're doing for that. So for example, we submit to the Times Higher Education Impact Submission, which is for the Sustainable Development Goals. So we were able to use a lot of the evidence that we gathered there. We have other returns that we have to do, so we linked into that. So it's being aware. The challenge is just having that overview of everything that's happening at the organisation, so that you don't end up duplicating what somebody else may have already done. So just being aware of everything that's happening across your organisation. And similarly, not a challenge, but the really positive thing is it helps you see where the gaps are, not just when you get the final assessment and the result, but as you're doing it, you know, you can start to see where perhaps you need, you know, a real key thing is, how do you evidence impact? And you know, you can start to see where you're not doing it. You know, you're doing the work, you know, you're having impact, but it's not being evidenced correctly. So not so much a challenge, but like a really a key thing, you know, that you start to see as you're doing the submission.
So perhaps, Rick, from the assessment side of things, I know we've also got Nikki with us today, who works with some of our assessments as part of the team. But Rick, if I, sort of that assessment sort of side of things, and that stakeholder engagement and the evidence that's being gathered, perhaps sort of give a bit of a brief overview about the different types of evidence that's available, that you can actually accept. So it isn't all financial data, it's a combination of different types of evidence in different formats.
Yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, it's interesting to hear Andy talk there, because he was saying about how they were working out the gaps as they went along, because the process begins with a self-assessment in effect, which is a rather lengthy looking form, which is a long set of questions which essentially walks people through what the standard looks like and asks them to think about how they believe they're achieving it, what sort of evidence they've got available that proves that. Yeah, and once they're providing a narrative there, yeah, broad statements as how they believe it. Yeah, they are meeting the criteria, but then should be signposting to the various types of supporting evidence that may be in place that help corroborate that. And that we don't define what that looks like. I think that's very important to say. How organisations actually achieve the criteria, it's up to them to show us. But they do need to be able to show it's real, it's current evidence. They've not just made it up, but it's stuff that is part of their day-to-day lives, if you like. So I mean, so that can come through reports they're keeping, meeting notes, yeah, different plans they have in place, policies, yeah, pointing to stuff on their website. It could be videos. So that's all the sort of hard evidence, if you like. But beyond that, we then further test it through a stakeholder survey, which is asked a set of questions that help further reflect back upon the criteria, which we encourage all employees to complete. And also anybody else that isn't necessarily employed but works closely with the organisation and is very familiar with them, possibly in some sort of governance capacity, if not a partnership one. So that helps provide additional sort of indicators, if you like, of how well that organisation is performing. But finally, it's capped off with interviews with stakeholders, again, principally employees, but also could include other stakeholders as well. And what we're really doing there is both, I mean, it's kind of a devil's advocate role in that you're asking people to talk about stuff that you've already seen in the self-assessment review that the organisation's completed, just to make sure that they believe it's happening. But it's also helping us build upon that picture. And it always surprises me how much organisations actually miss in terms of what they've gathered, and how much I then actually sort of also collect through just talking to their people as well. So, you know, broadly speaking, those are the types of evidence that we use, but what it looks like in practice can vary greatly, and we don't define that as long as you can show us that it's real.
And so in terms of the social enterprise mark and the support that both ISC, IC24 and the university have had, the support and the guidance from the assessor that's allocated to your accreditation, how has that been, and have you found that they've kind of challenged you almost in terms of that feedback to inform strategic decision making sort of through the process?
Yeah, I think from a personal point of view as well, I think it's really important. It's a collaboration. I suppose it's not a case of you fill in the form, you send it off, and if you meet if you've included enough.
Not like sending homework to the headmaster. We're not going
exactly.
down that route.
You're getting it marked, and you pass or fail. It's not that. It's a collaboration. Obviously, you guys want social enterprises to do well. You raise the profile of the industry, so it's a joint effort really. And I know there's a few times when I've kind of submitted the form firstly to Richard and then to Nikki, where we'd and then they come back and say, yeah, good, but I think you need a bit more on this. Ask some questions, probe on it, and it's supporting you to kind of draw out the right information rather than you giving it your best go, and if you don't achieve it, then you fail and you go back to the beginning and start again. So I think it's just like a sycophant, but it's really important to kind of have that that collaborative approach to it.
Mm. Andy, how have you found it?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's very collaborative, and I think as Rick said, it's very supportive. So there is you walk through it. There's the initial kind of assessment where you assess yourself, and then there's a number of you go through a number of drafts of the final submission where you go back and forth. Gaps are identified or evidence that's perhaps the wrong evidence or in the wrong place. So there's a number of kind of back and forth and a number of drafts that you do before the final draft, which even then there will be comment back on, and you get a chance to go through it again and see where you may be missing things. So it's you're challenged from that point of view. It's not just a matter of throwing as much evidence as you can at it, which can be the case with certain submissions. You do have to go back again and again to look at what you're writing and how you're evidencing it, or if you're not evidencing it. And the assessor, in our case Rick, was supportive in making sure that we had enough time to have those conversations and to go back to improve, really, to ensure that we were able to obviously ultimately be accredited.
So I guess in terms of your mainly internal stakeholders, so staff teams, management teams, and it often has to be a sort of a top-down approach to take on an accreditation, because there are a number, you could be an investors in people, it could be an ISO. There are a number of accreditations that many businesses, the larger the business, often the more they need to have within their sector, their industry, as well as actually about their values. So has it, I guess, two-phase question really, has it felt onerous in terms of another accreditation, more evidence gathering, particularly within the staff team? So how has that been? Because you're Richard and Andy, you're here as advocates of the gold mark within your organisations, but actually, as you were saying, that sort of stakeholder, you have to kind of add further conversations, further information, absorption, further data gathering across your colleague cohort. So has that been easy to engage other members within your staff teams and perhaps even external stakeholders as well that you're working with? Andy first.
Yeah, I'd go back to an earlier point, risk of being repetitious, but that first step is to look at what other accreditations you may be doing, or other submissions, or other reasons that you're supplying data, so that you're not asking people to duplicate. So you're not going back and saying, well, I provided that 6 weeks ago for the HESA submission, you know,
Yeah.
what you want me to do again, is it different, what's the so I think, you know, you have to do a bit of research. I guess you have to be hopefully, you know, when it's been decided who is going to coordinate or manage the submission, I guess that's the first decision, which I didn't make. I was asked to do it, but obviously I was identified as the person who would have that initial, not all of the knowledge, but I would be aware, and or I would know who to go and speak to and ask initially to say, well, what, you know, we need data, we need evidence, we need narrative. What have we been working on over the last 12 months that that we can actually have some very quick wins and get that evidence? So I would start there. So that then hopefully rules out most of the people that you would be asking to, you know, do the same thing again. So then it's a matter of then reaching out to other people, of, you know, people who are haven't been asked in the last 3 weeks or 6 months, and engaging them. So I think I would go back to that. Not duplicating things, and finding out where that evidence is and that data.
And engage people, key people within the cascade of the organisation, engage them early.
And have a plan as to who you need to go and talk to, and in what order, and a timeline for it, so that you can also give them you know, time to provide what you need as well. So you have to there's a, you know, obviously a certain amount of planning that needs to go into it, so that you can ensure that you're giving people enough time to engage.
Thank you. Richard, is there anything you would like to add to that, or perhaps tell us a little bit more about how you're levering the Gold Mark accreditation across ISC 24?
Yeah, I think just to touch on the point of just kind of going on concurrently in the chat from Jane around asking, you know, is it a time-consuming process? I think certainly, you know, it's not just a quick kind of tick box exercise that you can, you know, knock out in an afternoon, and rightly so. I think, you know, as an organisation that, you know, places a lot of value on it, you wouldn't want it to, I guess, to be kind of, yeah, handed out willy-nilly. You know, you've got to be able to kind of put some work into it, put some effort into it, and you reap the reward. And certainly from a point of view where we use it to win extra business. You know, if that is the sway between us and another organisation, and we win a new service on the basis of those extra few points we won on social value, then, you know, it pays for itself in terms of the financial input and the time input. But you know, it's a couple of points made there. You know, if the data is readily available, then it doesn't need to be time consuming. I think Nikki and I started to have quite a back and forth, and she was, you know, quite, you know, kind of, you know, rightly kind of grilling me on some of the, you know, you need a bit more, you know, quantifiable data on these bits. So I think, you know, it's not something you can just kind of rattle off, but yeah, I think that's right. I think that it needs to be that way. But, you know, the benefits are there. I mean, there's a benefit from the, I guess, the marketing and PR point of view, but you know, we don't do it as a PR exercise. That's a benefit to it. We do it because it kind of enhances our status as a social enterprise. You know, when we're talking to other partners who might want to work with us, when we're talking to commissioners that, you know, we want to, you know, bid for their services, yeah, it's about demonstrating that, you know, we're a good social enterprise. And sometimes with the kind of, you know, the NHS is quite kind of binary. You know, you're NHS or you're a private provider, you know, sucking money out of the NHS, and, you know, we use it as an opportunity to say, actually, we're neither in a way. You know, we're about as close to the NHS as you can get. Then you get some of the benefits of working for the NHS, but you also get the freedom to innovate. And people that join us from the NHS say, you know, wow, I never worked for a social enterprise before. So yes, it's the best experience because you can do things. You're not kind of constrained like you are in the NHS by you know, frameworks and, you know, bureaucracy.
Thank you. I'm going to sort of open up the floor, so please feel free to unmute yourselves, and we'll sort of see. I think Lucy's got a question in a moment. Sophie will be kind of like looking through some of the questions which have been coming through on the chat, so thank you for those. We'll try and get through the majority of them, but obviously we've got contact details for Sophie, myself, if anybody wants to email us if we don't get everything covered in our remaining sort of 15 minutes. So can I just check in with Lucy? Lucy, did you still have a question that you wanted to put out? And then I'm going to go to Ian, because I can see Ian's got a hands up, and then we'll do some of the other chat questions.
Yeah, I don't want to hog it, because obviously it's for other people, but it was a question that's come up from a number of universities in a few networks that I've been in recently. And it's about kind of how you get more strategic buy-in to social enterprise when you're in such a big institution like a university, and how the Gold Mark might have helped with that. And I wondered if you'd got any examples of how that might have worked, Andy.
Well, I think, you know, one key driver for the university, well, for any university, is around career and employability statistics for you know, your students when they complete their journey with you and they go off into the workplace. And so you know, a key element around a social enterprise and the hub that we're developing is to support you know, that as much as we can in terms of students developing their own social enterprises, but also working for social enterprises, gaining experience. So we were able to kind of click into that element, but then also other things across the university in terms of, you know, I've mentioned the work we're doing around the Sustainable Development Goals, which is also a key driver. So we're reviewing our organizational strategy at the moment, and the areas that will become kind of the key, or the 3 pillars, are around health and safety, equality, diversity and inclusion, and sustainable development. And all of those 3 things were key to our submission. So it develops hand in hand, I suppose. But yeah, we're now able, with the work that we're doing around the Social Enterprise Hub, we've got much more strategic approach to it, whereas starting at the beginning with the accreditation, it was more trying to understand what we're doing in this space, and having done that, which is what the accreditation helped us to do, you can then move into a more strategic level of how we're going to embed this across the university. So yeah, definitely it was a key thing to help us forward in that journey.
Thanks, Andy.
That's the space we're in now, is developing our social enterprise strategy.
Brilliant, and great question, Lucy. Thank you for that. I'm going to hop to Ian just before I ask Sophie to perhaps pull out a couple of key questions from the chat. But Ian, you've been very patiently waiting with your polite hand up. So what would you like to ask? And is it to somebody in particular, or is it a sort of a general observation, statement, question?
I have 2 questions, unfortunately. One's for Richard and one's for Rick. So for Rick, you mentioned early on about one of the things we'll look for is financial transparency. Obviously, we do our reporting that we have to do. My experience is that accountants don't like to give any further information than they legally have to. So what are you asking for there?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, for us, I think it's about how you demonstrating to your stakeholders what you're actually doing with all the income that you generate in any given year. So it doesn't have to be about what your accountants produce necessarily, but often what you'll find organisations have is they'll have like an accountant's report, and then they'll have their own annual report where they actually, you know, talk in much greater detail about the different investments they've made in either infrastructure or other facilities or resources which go towards either enhancing the social value they can create or adding to it tremendously. And that could be through how they're actually providing free services to the local community, for instance, and what the actual value of that is. So it's about how you can actually sort of go about pointing out how to use the indicator of social enterprise. I think really is the key one. How you're using profits or income to actually maximise the social output that you generate and social outcomes. So it doesn't have to be through the accounts itself, but through the general narrative that you provide and other social impact reporting that you do.
So it could be really simple things like actually keeping a note of when you've provided free venue space for a community group or a social enterprise sector conference, she says, coming up next year.
What we would say is really,
you know, it might not be a direct contribution cost or an income line on your profit and loss, but actually keeping account of some of those things which might seem like, oh yes, of course you can have a room, that's not a problem. But actually, if that's for a sort of a mental health first aid training room kind of thing, that's really important. That still comes in.
I mean, what we would recognise as being really strong evidence is where you have gone to the trouble of trying to quantify that. And I would say that generally speaking, it's the area that most social enterprises haven't become proficient in. It's often one of the recommendations that appears in all my reports after doing assessments. They can talk generally about how they've invested income and profits to maximise those social outputs and outcomes, but they haven't thought about, well, how much did it actually cost us? So that's often a development point. If you could get to that level of reporting, I think that becomes really powerful in distinguishing what makes you different from another business that's in the same sector that isn't a social enterprise.
Thank you, Rick. That's really helpful, I think. Has that answered your question, or question one, Ian?
It does, and in fact leads on to the thing I was going to ask, which is to Richard. Your social return on investment matrix may produce some of the evidence that would support journey towards a gold mark. Is that anywhere? Could we utilise that and utilise that tool in order to evidence towards that? Because you're in a good position to answer that.
Yeah, well, so we're working with, it's developed by the University of Northampton. So it's probably worthy of, I can probably get the contacts and put you in touch, but it's something that we've kind of linked in with them. It's a piece that their researchers have put together to, it helps you develop a matrix, some of those, like you say, the return on the investment, so social value KPIs. So, and I think this is the point where we're saying to Nikki, I thought, oh, actually, we could use this and we could use that. Whereas actually, the idea would be you go onto your reporting suite and it's all there on a beautiful dashboard already. Whereas, what we were doing was kind of thinking, actually, I can go away and get you that data, kind of link it into social value. So for us, it was about kind of looking to embed it in the kind of the day-to-day reporting. And I think that's what that piece of work would do. But certainly we couldn't take the credit for the actual kind of the science and the research behind it. That would be a fellow gold mark holder, I think, University of Northampton.
Brilliant, thank you, Richard. Sophie, I think we've probably got time for two short questions. Are there sort of any that sort of rise to the top that you think would be really helpful to the group we've got with us today?
Yeah, I think one thing that would be useful, Jane asked a question a while back and there was a lot of responses in the chat. I think it would be useful to get Andy and Richard's input on that. She said it seems like a very time-consuming process going through the gold mark assessment, and how much capacity is actually needed internally within your teams to complete that.
Yeah, I think yes, in some ways it's pretty answered a bit in the chat around, you'll get out what you put in. And you put in the time and you put in the effort, and you get the gold mark if the evidence is right. I think for me, one of the parts that took a little time was, especially working in a 24/7 organisation, was just trying to set up some of the interviews where Nikki wanted to speak to some of our frontline people, our drivers, for example, that are maybe a bit kind of not regular on their emails. So you're trying to get hold of people's personal numbers, call them when they maybe got a second job. So there's a little bit of time in kind of that coordination of setting up the interviews. But I think as I say, you get out what you put in, and it's a worthwhile process if you can you then get the benefit from having the social mark in terms of status, potentially new business. But from my point of view, I did it on my own with a colleague who kind of helped coordinate some of those interviews. But broadly speaking, it was a it was a one person
and
task.
easier in subsequent years. It's that sort of, and it's about that maintaining that quality, which I'm sure Rick would say is so important, you know, because the accreditation has to have value across the sector. So actually putting that time in first year, going for the gold mark, but it reaps the benefits in subsequent years, in that it becomes a more embedded information gathering, evidencing part of your sort of organizational processes, and obviously sort of that linkage that Lucy made about strategic plan, pillars that are really important around values and delivery for organizations, and then actually this kind of sucks in the evidence for how that's being achieved from the strategic plan. Andy, very quickly, I'm going to be, we've got 5 more minutes, so I'm going to be tight in terms of length of answer, if I may.
Well, yeah, I agree with Richard. It was, you have to pick the right person to coordinate and manage the submission, because it mainly falls on them, and if they've then got some support in terms of the admin bits and pieces. So it's picking the right person is the key thing, and then they have the skills and the ability to get the information, but ask in the right way and so on, and understand who they need to talk to. And then I think something which social enterprise will be taking forward, I think, which is COVID inspired, that's not the right word, but because of COVID. So we did our interviews online. And so I think it's important for the assessor ultimately to visit, everybody, but I think maybe a more hybrid way forward, and that makes it easier, because I've done accreditations before, and if it's someone's on site on X day and you have to try and get everybody in that room on that day, it's a nightmare, and it never happens anyway, and people don't turn up, and the wrong people, and so on. So I think doing a lot of the interviews, or some of them online, helps you to get more people interviewed, and to get the right people interviewed. So I think that was a good thing that came out of COVID.
Thanks, Andy. Sophie, have you got one more question that you'd like to pull out? I know that, and I really appreciate that there's been some great chat going on. Apologies if yours isn't the question that's coming out the lucky dip bag right now.
Yeah, there has been some great dialogue, so it's good that other people are sort of feeding in and answering some questions. And the one that I probably would pull out is from Hannah, who I think is joining us from Bath Spa University, and she had a question for Andy, but I guess it could also go to Richard. Was asking around whether you did any sort of internal PR or internal comms exercise for staff before you shared the survey, to sort of give them some information on the process and why it was important to the organisation.
I think Matt at the Growth Company would be interested in this, because this is very pertinent to the conversations that Rick, Matt and I were having yesterday. So fantastic question. Thank you, Hannah.
Yeah, well, just generally comms around the whole process, really. So we did the initial social enterprise mark and then the gold mark right after it. So there was no gap for us. And I think doing that initial assessment, we were then able to promote it because we achieved it, and then but quickly moved on to the gold. So I think that's quite a good way to do it. You don't have that gap. And so then you're able to use that to promote and communicate. We used our Vice Chancellor. He does a blog every couple of weeks.
Oh,
so
great.
he's talking about social enterprise. We have Westminster Weekly, which is every 2 weeks, a kind of staff newsletter, and other newsletters we have across our colleges. So yeah, we brought our comms team on right from the beginning. And so then we were able to feed out messages and gain more support, so that when we then had to go and ask people for things, they were aware of what was going on. So I wouldn't wait for the survey. I would start, announce it from the beginning.
Right.
And obviously, if you can do that initial assessment, you can then use that to promote the success and engage people that way. Yeah, but happy to talk offline as well if you need any.
Thank you, Andy.
Or catch up. Yeah.
Richard, I think almost the last 30 seconds to you.
I'll be really quick. Yeah, I think the first time around that we did the survey, we actually ran it, the way it timed was that it was shortly after our annual employee survey. So I think we got a slightly lower take up than we would have liked, because they didn't really align, and you probably had a bit of kind of survey fatigue. What we did this time round was that we embedded the questions into our annual employee survey, because then we're talking about getting a significantly larger response rate. And we use an external company, the BHER company, the results of which formulate the Times top 100 list, and that they were really good in terms of you can add your bespoke questions into that. So we had to reword them slightly, which Social Enterprise Mark were really helpful with, in terms of making sure they were still fit for purpose, but they fitted into the survey as well. So that worked much better for us, and that you get twice the response rate.
Thank you. I'm going to kind of bring this to a close. I do feel as though we could probably carry on chatting for at least another half an hour. So I'm going to apologise. I think there are probably some questions in the chat that we didn't get around to addressing within this session. If there's anything really key, perhaps we can kind of pick up or do some guidance in a thank you roundup email, but also, as to say, Sophie's email, my email. Please do get in touch and re-ask those questions, and we'll give you a personalised response to those. I would really like to thank both Andy and Richard, as well as our Rick, for all the contribution. So really appreciate that. So thank you so much. Brilliant, really enjoyable and energising conversations. Our next coffee morning conversation is going to be in January, so it seems really strange to wish you all a very happy Christmas at this point. But we have a topic of social procurement, so I think that's going to be a really interesting topic for those organisations who are commissioning within their supply chain, and how do they do social procurement perhaps a little better, take it another step on, and equally obviously for social enterprises and mark holders who are looking to apply for those contracts. How do you engage? How do you tell your story? Which we've touched on a little bit in terms of some of the conversations today. I'm going to wish you all a lovely day. Got great autumn sunshine outside, so take a break from your screens, go and have a walk around the block, whatever that may be. Bit of vitamin D, bit of sunshine, and thank you all so much for your time today, and have a great rest of the week. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone.